All right, so now the recording is on, and we'll dive in then to today's topic, which, as I said, is some tips and tricks with the treatments editor. So just some shortcuts, some things maybe that you didn't know that were there, or some optimizations perhaps that you can take advantage of to speed things along as you are filling in those products that you're testing. It's a pretty important part of the protocol for sure as you fill in and plan your treatments that are going to be included. And so we'll just kind of dive right in here. So I've got a trial here open. Of course, pretty much the treatments editor is basically the same whether you're in a protocol or a trial. So pretty much everything we cover today, I would say, is identical in either type of file that you're in. I just chose to open this trial here. It's kind of the same one that we have been using as an example in some other webinars, and it has a couple of products here just so we can kind of start with that. So kind of the first thing I want to show would be controlling what it is you see on the treatments editor. And so we refer to that in general in ARM as your view. So there's always a lot of different fields. In this case, it's columns of information that you can fill in here in the treatments. But a lot of times you're not going to use all of them that are available. And so it can be kind of helpful to pare down all of those columns into just the ones that you typically use. And so that's really where the view comes into play. And there's some tips to kind of make that a little bit easier and go a little faster. For example, if this description column, you simply, I'm never going to use this, I don't fill it in, you can always just right click in any row of that column. And there's the option to hide the current field. And so that takes that description column away from view, although it doesn't delete any of the data. So it's no longer visible to us. You may have noticed I had a little bit of information actually in it with the check, just saying it's the untreated. We did not delete that information. And if you look in your properties panel at the bottom of your treatments editor, we have a section for the hidden fields. So those are all of the columns that currently we aren't viewing. And so I can always toggle back on that description if I wanted. And of course, the information I entered is still there. Another way to kind of speed this up, here I'm in a trial, so I filled in my treatments already. So when I come back to view the study, I can kind of quickly get rid of any of the columns that don't have any information to kind of shrink down the size here and maybe see all of the information all at once. You do that also with the right click, just really anywhere in the table entirely. And there is a command to auto size column widths. That first will shrink down any, all of the different columns to fit the contents of those fields here that we see. So now, like my treatment name shrunk down because I had a lot of empty space that I didn't necessarily need. And so in most cases, I think that will actually shrink down the full width of your treatment editor, just to fit just the content that you have in that study. Another thing you can do in the properties panel, in this views section, there is an option to hide empty fields. So if we look right now, I have the specific gravity column has nothing in it. The application timing column and the comment 1 and 2, all of these are totally empty, so there might not be any need to see them. And so it's just a one click in that view section to hide empty fields, and it'll automatically take out and hide any columns that don't have any information in them. One nice quick way just to condense down what you're looking at into only, in this case, only what has been entered. And of course, you can always find a certain piece of information. If I do need to now fill in specific gravity, in the properties panel, we have those hidden fields. If you want to see the full list, you can either scroll down with this little button here will display the entire list, and then you can choose to put back the specific gravity or whatever piece of information you might need to utilize and fill in. So these are all kind of dealing with that view of what we see. If you want to have kind of the full list of all of the different options related to what you're seeing, either in the properties panel, there's a button for view options, where we can also get there from tools, options, and then we have the treatment view. Either that button or in the tools menu will get you to the same place. And so this is really kind of the formal listing of all of the options related to the view. And so here on the right is our treatment fields section. And this is really all of the possible columns that we can see in the treatments editor and whether they're visible or not. So as we were changing what columns we could see and couldn't, that's really kind of behind the scenes what was changing. Is just marking down whether or not a certain column is visible. So you can always change that here as well. One other thing you can change here in this table would be the width of the field. So thinking about the content in the field itself, what value you have entered, for example, the treatment name. How many characters can you enter in a treatment name? That is controlled here by this column called setting. And so actually I kind of chose treatment names specifically because it's kind of an interesting one. You'll see that by default, the setting is 30. So you have 30 characters to put in the treatment name. But kind of behind the scenes, the structure of ARM, which we call the study definition, is actually set up to support anywhere between 0 and 75 characters for a treatment name. So if you are in a situation where you're trying to type in more characters and ARM is stopping you and say there's no more room, for this case, the treatment name, you can actually change that limit of 30 and change that to another value. So maybe I can move that up to 50 instead to support the number of characters I would need. And so if you just kind of look at the list here, that range is kind of that behind the scenes setting of what the structure of this file can support. And so a lot of times, we already are at the maximum, or at least the default value is the maximum. So the form concentration, most of the units probably aren't going to be something you would want to change. But like the description, that one certainly could be widened if you needed to. Whereas a lot of these are kind of where they already need to be, but there are a few cases where you could. And so that's really the other thing you can do here in the treatments editor is decide what's the maximum number of values, number of characters to put into a field. And just to answer the question here, kind of thinking about the number of visible fields that we are choosing here, these options then do correlate into the reporting. So the question was, will those fields then be hidden in the printed report as well? And so the short answer is yes. You can hide those, even if there's information, you can hide them from view, so that way you don't see them on the screen, and then that usually translates into your reporting as well. There are a couple of options, and if we have time, we can kind of show some of those that you can fine tune which fields and which columns would get included in the report. But by and large, yeah, you're more kind of lean on what you have hidden as, kind of guessing that means you don't really need it on the report as well. So that's a good question. And so that's really the treatment fields. Again, kind of the columns you see on the screen. A couple of other options here on this dialog, just to note, there is an ingredients grid, and that's really for if you are to put in ingredients tied to the products that are in your treatment list. Um, there's kind of an interface for tracking that and the percentages of those ingredients that make up your product. If we have time, we'll show that. I don't think it's used too often, and so I kind of have it towards the bottom of my list. If we have time, we can cover that. But that's where you can turn that on and begin to kind of use and maybe tweak that the ingredients there. The freeze field. So if you'll notice in the treatments editor here, we have a few of these columns are a yellow color, and then the rest are white. Just looking at the different columns, that's really the freeze field. So as I were to scroll, no matter how wide my screen or narrow my screen is, this is set up so the treatment number, the treatment type, and the treatment name will always be visible. And that's really we're defining the freeze field, kind of like in Excel. If you use that feature in Excel, we kind of borrowed that terminology. And so you could choose kind of at what point it's just going to pick whichever column you choose, then all of the columns to the left will also be frozen, if you will. So if I were to I always wanted to also see the formulation information, I could mark the form type. If I say okay now, it will set. Now all of a sudden the form type and the formulation information will always be visible. So let me try to make my screen a little more narrow. It'll let me here so we can see kind of how that affects the scrolling, that those are always visible, and then we scroll through the remaining columns. The default is treatment name, but you could expand that if you wanted to. Change that back though here to my treatment name. The color bands, so looking at the rows of our editor, you'll notice that treatment 1 is empty, if you will, just white, but then treatment 2 has this lighter green background to it. And so then kind of every other treatment number has a slightly different color, and that kind of helps visually separate the treatments. And so that's the color bands option. So that by default is to separate them by the treatment number. If you don't like that setting, you can turn that off, and then they'll all be just the plain color, if you will. So once you have this kind of set the way you would like, one more feature for your view is that you can actually save all of these settings and give it a name and save it to a file. So this could be useful if you kind of have a different view for maybe different parts of the season. So maybe when you're first going to create your protocol, you probably might have a slightly different view of all of the possible columns that you typically would use. And then maybe when you're moving on to just reviewing the treatment list or reporting, then you can choose which fields you'd like to see in the reporting, and then save those choices to a file. And then it's very easy to load and make sure you always have them that same setting essentially before you go to print a report. And so you can do that by pressing the Save View button. So we're really encapsulating really everything we chose here on this dialog, what fields are visible, how wide they are, everything like that. And so you can give it a name. So maybe in this case, this is the view I want for when I'm going to create my final report. These are the fields I want to see. So you can give that a name, and it just gets saved onto your computer. And you can remind yourself why this is. This just becomes visible when you are loading a view, if you want to remind yourself with a little bit more text what you're doing for this particular file. So now if I were to, I'm going to click show all, then show all of the fields. And so maybe my view has changed now. And now, weeks later, months later, I'm ready for my reporting. It can be very easy to restore back exactly what I had looked at before. you can do that in this views list. Towards the bottom, actually, it has all of the named views that you have created, and it will load then that view. So if I click my final report, then it immediately restores back just those columns that we wanted to view. So that'd be really nice kind of time with that question, as well as load that view for your report. And now I can go and print my report, and I have just the pieces of information I typically want for the report, whatever task it is that I'm working on right now. So a nice way to automate that. Those view files, we show they just get saved onto your computer. So they're pretty easy. If you wanted to share that with a colleague, you can just go and find that file and send it in an email or drop it on the network or something, and other people can use that, because it's not the contents of the editor of what you're seeing. It's just the settings of which fields are visible and how wide they are and things like that is really all you're encapsulating in that view file. All right, so that's really, the treatment view in a nutshell. So I will want to maybe here segue a little bit into maybe, some tips for filling in your list here, and some keyboard shortcuts to speed the process of entering in treatments. And so to start, I have a treatment list here. I will kind of use this as a way to piggyback on and add some more treatments. And so maybe the first tip here is, if I want to add another treatment, but maybe actually I want it in between my third and fourth treatments, you can right click and insert a treatment. And you can also do this from the edit menu. There's a command to insert treatments as well, but you can actually insert a new treatment in between 3 and 4. So you don't have to just append it to the end. So I will insert one new treatment here. So now it gives me treatment number 4 is totally empty, and it moved that other treatment down the list. So let's just say it's the herbicide here. Maybe it's my Stomper Plus again. That's that same product, but just at a different rate. So the first keyboard shortcut here to show is the copy above. And so if you insert just a single quote, it might be a little hard to see on my screen, but it's just the single quote keys. So on my keyboard, at least, it's right next to my enter key, in between the enter and the semicolon key, just a single quote. If you put that in a field and then press enter or tab to leave the field, it copies whatever value is directly above it in the editor. And so I did that with the form concentration. I can also do it for the unit, just a single quote, and then I'll press enter to move out of the cell, and it copies whatever value is right above there. Maybe this time I'll click out of that cell, just as long as if there's a single quote character in that cell, when you leave that cell, it'll copy whatever is directly above it in the editor. So that can be a nice quick way to duplicate, in this case, the formulation information. And now maybe this one is 4 kilograms per hectare. So I'll use the quote key to duplicate that unit as well. Let me insert one more treatment here. If you want to duplicate the entire treatment line, so maybe it would have been faster for me, I've got all of this filled in, maybe I'll fill in my application code with the same information. If I want to duplicate this entire line and then go back and only change the 1 or 2 values I might need, instead of the single quote key, use the double quote. And so the trick here is go to the treatment name field specifically, and in the treatment name, use the double quote. And for me, it's the same keyboard key. I just hold the shift button to get the double quote instead of that single quote. You put that in the treatment name, and now when you leave that field, there I pressed enter, it copies the entire treatment line right above it into that line that we used the shortcut. It's now in this case, I can just go in and really I only have one value to change, and that's the rate itself, or whatever the case may be. It duplicates that entire line that's directly above it with the double. Another shortcut would be to insert treatment separators. And so basically when you're looking at this list, it's pretty compressed. The coloring can kind of help to view the differences there, but we can insert what Aaron calls treatment separators, really just empty lines in between all of these treatments. Be helpful for just viewing and kind of separating those, but also if you had to add maybe more components to each one. And so the keyboard command for that would be the Control button and F7. So that inserted an empty line. It's not empty treatments. I don't have a treatment number linked, but it's simply just empty lines across the screen there. And I think that should be here. That is also on the right click too. So if you right click anywhere in the editor and insert treatment separators, that will insert those spaces. But it's only kind of a view in a sense that it's not adding those permanently. So if I were to change out of this editor and come back, it will, it didn't get rid of those. Maybe if I think if I maybe closed the study and came back in, it would get rid of those. Kind of, it's a temporary thing, but it can be really handy too if I needed to add another component. So maybe I wanted to add another component to treatment number 2. It can be really handy then to have all those spaces. Now I can just insert a treatment line for number 2, and maybe it's an adjuvant in this case. And I can just pick from that list and grab the NIS calc I did here in treatment 6 or whatever. So again, that keyboard command was Control plus F7 that inserted the treatment separators. If I do it one more time, the only difference here is that it adds one more empty line there. And that also was on the right click for insert treatment separators. And then there's a question, if that empty line translates to the printed report, and I would say no. If maybe we quick open up the print reports here and just look at my trial treatments, and I'll just preview that list, you'll see that those separators do not appear in the report. And they're just kind of a temporary thing, but it's not actually inserting all those blanks into the file per se. And so you'll see on the report, it's not going to add a bunch of empty space on the report. So that's a good question. Oh, and there we go. Now I can see how it took away the separators because I went to the print reports. So just like if we were to close and come back into this file or open up another file, those separators disappear. They get taken away in a sense, but again, Control F7 would add all of those in again. So that's just a nice way to add a little space, maybe start to sneak in some more components if you want. Related to that, taking this example of maybe I have this adjuvant that I need to add to all of these Stomper Plus products. It kind of ties with one of the questions as I was showing that double quote that copies right above. If you wanted to actually kind of paste this, copy and paste this, in this case, this component, this adjuvant, onto several treatments all at once. The command for that is paste special. And so instead of using a keyboard shortcut, I'll kind of show you the process. Essentially what we do is if I click into this component here, this adjuvant I want to copy, then I can right click and I can copy the current treatment line. So that's going to take not just the characters NIS. If I click copy, it's only going to copy that one value I've clicked on, but this will copy the current treatment line. It actually will highlight to show that I've got all of this information. And actually let me do that for treatment 6, since I've got all of the information for that one. So here I've got all of my rate and everything I want here. I can right click and copy that current treatment line. And now if I right click and do a paste special, instead of just pasting that right into whatever row I clicked into, ARM is going to ask me what treatment components I want to include in this paste. And there should be a dialog, but let me hit enter here, because when I have my screen resolution this way, then it doesn't show up. So sorry, I'm moving this off my screen just to get my dialog to show up. So I'm repeating that step. I'm going to do a paste special. If I do it from this monitor, then it'll show up. Sorry about that. So then I have this message here that is asking to show the treatment numbers. Let me bring back my ARM here. I think it should work if I bring these over myself. So now it has the question of what treatment numbers do we want to paste that whole treatment line onto. So this is how we can decide, okay, I want you to bring that in this case, that NIS adjuvant and paste it onto treatment 3, treatment 4, and treatment 5. You can click right on the editor to choose the lines you want, or you can hand type. If I want to bring them into all of them, I'll just say 1 through 6, and it'll add that to every single treatment line if I wanted to. So here I'll do 3, and you can also pick specific numbers. It doesn't have to be a range, just separate them with a space. So 3, 4, 5 in our case will work. And so once we choose those components, then when I say okay, it pastes that whole entire line onto treatment 3 and onto 4 and onto 5 all at once. So that can be a good time saver. Again, that was the paste special. It's in the right click. It should also be on the edit menu to paste special. You can choose several lines to do that with. You could even paste multiple lines. So let's, maybe I'll add, to make this a 6, let's add maybe another adjuvant. I don't know if you would ever have multiple of them, but let's just grab a couple new ones here, just straight from my list. Don't worry about really what they are, but let's say we've got several pieces of information we want to bring within our paste. You can actually, if you want to grab that current treatment line, if you click on that treatment line number, you'll see it's not really an editable value. So kind of like in Excel where you can click on the column heading and grab the whole column, you can do that here in ARM and grab this whole row. So if I click on 12 and I'm going to hold my mouse down to grab line 13 as well, then I can actually copy both of those lines together. And so now I'll have 2 lines in my clipboard in Windows that I can paste, and I can do a paste special, and it'll paste both of those lines all at once. And here it remembered my last selection of 3, 4, 5. And we'll say, yes, that's where I want to paste those onto. And so now it does that same action with multiple lines even at once. So a nice way to really in a hurry, duplicate a lot of information that might be the same in several treatment lines. And of course, you can always then come in and tweak it if maybe some of these are at different rates. It might be simpler to bring everything, copy them all and then go and change the particular values if they did vary just a little bit in each treatment. Once you paste it, then you're free to edit whatever is there afterwards. Just one more keyboard shortcut, since we're kind of on that, I think might be useful if you are maybe paring down your list. Maybe you're starting with the list from last year and there's a couple of components that you don't need. Instead of deleting, each row as you go, there's a couple of ways to get rid of a row. So let's just say we don't need the COC in this study. There's a right click and you can just delete the line. So the important difference here is if you delete the treatment, it's going to get rid of all 4 of these lines. It's going to say anything that's treatment number 3, I need to get rid of. Whereas if I say delete line, it's only going to get rid of the COC because that's the one I've clicked into. It's only going to delete treatment line 7. And so then ARM here, you can certainly do multiple lines if you wanted. I'll stick to just the one here to get rid of just the COC, starting at number 7. And that just gets rid of just that line without taking out the entire treatment. If you want to go even quicker than that without having that extra prompting, if you click into the treatment number column of the line you want to get rid of, then the keyboard shortcut Control plus Delete will delete out that line and not even ask you. It'll be a really quick way to delete lines. Again, I'm holding down the Control key. First, I put the cursor in the treatment number column of whatever I want to get rid of, and I hold down the Control key and press Delete. And that gets rid of that line without ARM, begging to make sure you want to do this type of thing. It will simply delete the line. I think those are probably the keyboard shortcuts that would matter the most. Kind of ones that get hidden a little bit. There is a reference. So under the help menu in our references list, there's a quick reference guide. It's kind of ironically named because it's like 40 pages or so. And that's actually where I got the list here. So it's on page 25. I think we have the treatment editor commands, but a lot of them are pretty simple, just moving from field to field. But you could check those out and play with them if you wanted to. I kind of highlighted the big ones that I think would really impact people the most. But again, that's just in the references list there. There's our quick reference guide. It has a bunch of little things like that aren't always super obvious. So. All right, so the next topic I want to cover would be the validation lists. And really a lot of these tips really apply in a lot of situations in ARM. As far as just how you navigate, some of them get pretty long, and so there's a lot of filtering and navigation you can do. So here with the treatments editor, the primary list that we work with is the product list. So if you click into the treatment name field, and then you either press the little drop down button or the F9 keyboard key, brings up your personal list for your treatment products. And they are grouped by the treatment type, really just for organization purposes primarily, that you won't want to have to scroll through all of your adjuvants just to find the fungicide product that you're looking for the study. So each different type of treatment has its own list to be able to find them simpler, basically. And so when you bring up that list, here I brought it up with my Stomper Plus product that was already filled in. And so that's the main method for adding products to your list, would be to fill in the details for your product, the treatment name, formulation information, if specific gravity, there's a few other fields that kind of get tied in. Once you fill it in, then you go back to the treatment name and view the list. And then ARM tries to look it up in the list. And if it does not find that product, then it asks if you want to add this product to your personal list. So, there really is no kind of industry-wide list. There's no organization that kind of keeps track of commercial, all these commercial products and all the details for them. So it's really up to the ARM user to fill in the products that they're working on. And so it'd be kind of one of the first starting points really with the treatments editor, and it can really save time so you're not hand typing all of those details each and every time. Now, when I say, okay, yes, let's add this to the list, we do get one question, and this is the ingredients that I mentioned before. So thinking about our Stomper Plus, if I had particular active ingredients that I wanted to track, we can put them here. So this can be used. Fertilizer studies is probably the most common one that I see or have people ask about. You can put the NPK values in there, but really any type of active ingredient that you would have that you might want to see, ARM can calculate kind of based on your product rate, what's the rate of the active ingredient as well. So ARM can provide some of those calculations in the reports and such if you wanted to see those values. I'll just leave them blank here in this case, and certainly if you leave it blank, you're not missing out on a whole lot here. Just that active ingredient and the concentration does not get filled in, and it'll just be empty if you were to look in the ingredients editor for that product. If we sneak a peek at this other product I had here in the treatments editor, you'll see that this one had a couple of active ingredients that they would have put into the editor, as well as the concentration of the two. So here now we have our Stomper Plus in our list. So that way, as we go, if I were to add another treatment here, yes, I'm inserting a new treatment, and we would pick from the herbicide list. Then I can quickly fill in those details again. And so here, this is kind of the default list that we start with. There are some example products in here, but they're by no means an extensive list. So here's kind of where I want to show some of the shortcuts to find what you're looking for in these lists, because they can be pretty long. And so probably the first one here that I use almost without even thinking is if you know what you're looking for. So in this case, I know I'm looking for Stomper. Then the leftmost column in the list, if you just start typing the characters of what you're looking for. So I'm going to start typing STOMP, then it brings that list automatically down to match the characters that you're entering. So I'll do that a little bit slower here. If I type in S, it brings me to the first name that starts with S, and then I can continue and do T. So now the first one that starts with ST, and then OMP. I waited too long in between there, so now it picked up the O. Let me do that one more time then. So STOMPER. You just keep typing until you get to the one you want, or you can stop at any point and scroll. But that can be a really quick way if you know exactly what that value is you're looking for. That'll bring you down to the value you need, and then you can press OK, and of course that loads in all of those columns of information that were saved into that list. So you're not typing in all the formulation details and the treatment name, everything. Let's open that list again, and if we're not totally certain, exactly what the name is, there is some filtering you can do to narrow down what we would be looking for. So for example, here, maybe like the Sencor, we have a whole bunch of different types, but I know somewhere in the name it's going to contain Sencor. What you can do is right click on the column that you want to search in and do a filter for. So you can basically filter for a keyword that it'll really do a contains filter. So any treatment name that in this case will contain the letters Sancor here. And when I say OK, it filters down the list and finds only items that contain that text. So this can be a nice quick way then to narrow down that list to find what you would be looking for. And if that's not quite the filter you want, you can always remove the filter and get back to the full list that you would like. Some other filtering you can do here, just depending on your use case here. For example, the formulation type. If I know that the formulation type is an L that I'm looking for, if you right-click on that L, you can actually filter by L. So I don't have to type in the value that's in that cell. If I type, if I right-click into this 4, it'll grab the 4. If I right-click into this treatment name here, it'll include that whole name. Let me right-click and filter by L, then it automatically shows only, in this case, are treatments that have exactly matched that form type of L. You can actually stack these. So this list is pretty short. We could probably have found what we wanted, but if the list was still a little long, you can do an additional filter. So if maybe then I'm going to filter the treatment name for, in this case, I'll choose master. I see here we have land master in some of these, so hopefully it'll bring the list down even further. Now it'll filter for both that formulation type that we chose and items that contain that text master in the name somewhere. And now we can find the one we want and load it and choose that. So these work, here I'm showing it in the treatment name list, but all of these work really in any list. So if you're hunting for a particular unit, you can do the same thing. So if I'm looking for kilograms, I can start typing in K. I guess we don't have a kilogram here for the form unit, but you can just start typing. Again, that's the leftmost column is where it will bring you to. Maybe I'll use that rate unit list and see that one has a little bit more kg. If I start typing that, it'll take me right to units that start with kilogram. So really, again, navigating these lists are, really can really save you a lot of time. Once you find what you want and have that value, you can always copy it. So if the percent weight to weight, if that's the value I already picked for 6, and I know that's what I'm using here in 7, I can just copy either with the right click or Control-C is the shortcut on your keyboard, and then you can paste. And here I did a Control-V to paste. And then since I had information ARMS, if I want to overwrite it, whatever a value is, you can always copy and paste too. Question here about the personal list. And so real quickly before I address that, when we view this list here, we call it a personal list. So this list, it exists just on your computer. It's something that you're populating and really no one else can see, which of course might be very important for the treatment list, less important for others. For example, like the formulation unit list. We can have this official list of units you can use, and you can actually choose here. This is called a master list because it's actually from the dictionary. So there's a database that gets installed with ARM. And for some of these kind of standard lists, in this case, it comes from SART. So there's the organization that has defined all of these kind of standard terms. You can actually add these to a personal list, which is really your favorites list in this case. So we have kind of a master, total list of all of them that are possible. That's set by somebody else, and everyone sees that same master list. But then you can create a favorites list. So if I'm always using the colony forming units per gram, then I can add to my personal list. And so then that is just on my computer. And it really, in this case, is just my favorites list from the master choices. That can be a nice way too for finding what you're looking for. Is if you only use a couple different items from that list, make this personal list of your favorites, and then it's a whole lot easier scrolling through and finding the one you need when it's only the handful that you ever use. So that's a personal list. I would almost rebrand it as a favorites list in this case, because it does link to a master list, and you're just pulling your favorites, the most used items from it. But in general, both this type of list and your treatment list that you're populating yourself are both types of personal lists. And so the question here is, are these lists, do those disappear when you update your license? And so those should remain on your computer regardless of any program updates you run, regardless of paying your maintenance, even if you were to change your license. So if maybe your boss changes, and so they change the name on the license, if you're still using the same computer, these lists will be still linked to your ARM, and so they should remain in place. Every once in a while, we do get a question where I ran an update and now all of a sudden my lists are gone. And we can kind of help you through that. If that does happen, it's fairly rare, but we have a couple of tools that can be helpful to restore some of those. And actually, if you joined us for our Dusting Off Your ARM webinar last week, I think it was, we talked a lot about the migration package. And that fit right in with this issue. That was one of the reasons we created that feature, is to provide a way to to save all of your lists in a separate file. So if something does happen during an update, or something happens to your computer entirely and you lose your whole ARM and your hard drive is gone or something, that migration package can be a nice way to preserve these personal lists and duplicate them somewhere else, so you can retrieve them and restore them to your replacement computer. So that's a very good question. Things happen, and so that's using some of those backup features can be really important to prevent losing those types of information. One more thing to show here with the validation list, and so here I'm showing our treatment list, is there's one other way to edit these lists. Specifically, you're thinking about your treatments that you're populating yourself. And instead of kind of going one by one to add the values that you have, if you open up the list, so you're viewing what list you would want to change, and then leaving that list open, go over to your edit menu. There's a command to edit your validation list. And so then this dialog here, it actually shows the whole list of all the different personal lists that you could edit, but it will automatically select whichever one you have open. That's why I recommend find the one that you want to change and then do the edit validation list, so you're not trying to memorize a bunch of file names that really don't mean a whole lot otherwise. So when you say okay, it actually opens this validation list almost like it's in Excel. So you have every column here that is contained in that list, and all of the values here. Most of mine are blank, but it has all of those values, and you can change anything that you would need to here. Some care would have to be taken. So, for like the formulation type, I can't. You got to be careful not to put in some value that's not in the list. So a little bit of care might need to be taken for doing that, but it could be a nice way to merge a couple lists. So what you can actually do here is, just like in Excel, you could grab all of your rows of information and copy and paste it into like an Excel spreadsheet. And maybe everyone in your group all does this and puts their own lists in an Excel file, and then you can filter out and get kind of build up a master list of all of the products everyone has entered into their own lists. And then you can come back in to edit your list and paste over the top. And then you really have, everyone gets a master list essentially of that information. So a lot like Excel, really anything you can do if you wanted to go to the bottom here, you can add more rows. So if I wanted to copy this Zorial and something very similar, but the other one is 90% and also is slightly different, you know, you can edit that list here, and then it's just a matter of saving the file kind of before you go and then closing that list. And now the next time you utilize your list here, then you can see if I go to the bottom, those changes here I made are visible. So that can be a nice way to kind of speed up the process of adding a bunch of things or even kind of compiling everything from a group. And we do actually have kind of one level higher if thinking about the idea of having a group of ARM users in your company that can kind of work together. If you wanted to, we have a feature that we can help set up where ARM actually would sync your personal lists. So as a group, you could have a master copy of really all of the personal lists. So not just treatments, but any personal list that you would find, your soils list, you know, things like that you're populating in ARM kind of fresh. You can have ARM actually sync that across multiple users. It's a pretty easy setup. Really, all we do is we create batch files that ARM runs, and you choose one person in your group to be the data coordinator, and really then they have the master copy. And so we install a special file on their computer where their ARM copies their lists out to, you know, a network location that would work to find to set up. It can be on Dropbox or OneDrive or just a network drive that your group has. And then the master person, their ARM copies those files out to that location, and anyone else in the group then, they get a different file where their ARM copies from that network location onto their computer. So they get the very same copy that that master person had. And that just continually syncs kind of each day. Each time ARM opens up the first time for the day, it goes out to the network and brings in, you know, any changes, anything that's been new. And so that it can be a little overkill for some groups, you know, a one-time transfer, or, you know, kind of just using this edit validation list might be simple enough just to do it in the spring once, so everyone's kind of on the same page, and then you all run with it. That can work just fine too. But I just like to throw that. I call it the validation list library is what we call it, just to give it a name, but it's really just this kind of constant syncing. And it's actually a very easy setup. It doesn't take too much time at all. So if your group is interested, just send us an email, and really it's usually about 3 emails back and forth of how to set this up, you know, where's a good spot to save it, and then here's the files and how to install it. It goes pretty quick. So there was one question here that I overlooked with the edit validation list, and it was just kind of the order of the list. And so let me just quick try to, it was about, you know, copy a row here, if it's going to reorder, you know, automatically. And so here I grabbed an L, and then maybe I'll just insert a row and paste in that last. So maybe I'll make it last 4. Now, when I press save, you'll notice it disappeared. It does reorder automatically. So as soon as I press save, actually, then it reordered. So on my lasso 4 I just created, it does automatically reorder for you, even just when you save it. in this editor. So you won't have things totally out of order. You can copy and paste and put wherever, and we'll sort it for you so it's not a mess when you try to find things in the list later. So it's a very good question there. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the validation list features. Really, the one other item I really wanted to show would be some study rules. Won't really introduce the entire topic. That's good for its separate webinar. But I think when looking at the treatments editor, there's a couple of important study rules that can be very useful, even if you aren't diving headlong into adding study rules everywhere in your whole trial, and even if you're just new to it. I think you can start slow, and you might see some of the advantages here, some of the rules specific to the treatments editor. So probably the most basic one, and really when we are looking at study rules, we're primarily going to be looking at the information that has been entered into the treatments editor, adding some rules or restrictions on that content that has been filled in. So it's especially critical if you're contracting out this research. So if you're planning out this treatment list, but then you're going to send this to another researcher, there are really nice functions to help control what information could get changed and what information is visible. Is really the two big ones. We can lock down particular information so that way it's not possible to change certain values. So maybe, for example, the rates. For whatever reason, maybe we had troubles some years with contractors or changing the rate values. And of course, that was obviously super critical. We were testing the rates, so we really need those to stay the same. What you can do is if you right-click in that column for the rate, the bottom section of the right-click menu is all related to study rules. And so you can add a rule. Here I'm going to require that that value actually is locked. So I can lock the rate field to prevent any edits from happening. And so now there's actually a little lock icon that shows up, and it's actually grayed out if that shows up on my screen. Now I did that for just this one cell, so it locked just this one value. If I want to lock the entire column, if I click on the rate heading, that will select that whole column. And now I can say for any treatment line at all, I do not want the rate value to be changed. So I can require and lock that field to prevent edits. Now the whole column is locked. You cannot change that value. It will not let you. Even if I were to add a new treatment, let's try to get around it. Let's add a new treatment. It will still be locked. And really that's controlled by, if I go to the study rules editor, here it's in our navigation bar. Here we are requiring in the treatments editor that the rate be locked. And so the trick here is you can define particular treatment lines. And so the very first time I did that right click, it would have looked like this. It would have had just the two. So just that single treatment line, that value is locked. If I clear out that list so there are no numbers at all, then that actually sets it to all. So now all columns or all lines in the treatments editor will have the rate locked. If I go back here, we try to add this new treatment, that's going to be locked. I'm not going to be able to change that value. So if you don't want them to change it, one recommendation on that, is, so having the rule ID be required means it is literally impossible. ARM will not let somebody else change that rate value. Sometimes things happen, and so if something very out of the ordinary happens and the researcher needs to change the value, if you have it set to required, ARM's not going to let them. And the only workaround is they have to contact you as the sponsor. If you were the sponsor, you're contracting that out. They would have to contact you, and you would have to go in and make that change in the file and then resend them the file. So for locking information, it might not be a bad idea to choose recommended instead. Actually, let me do that here on the editor. Just for locking information, if I want to lock the treatment column here, and let's recommend that it's locked. What will happen then is it'll still have that rule and still be telling users they can't change that value, but if they were to try to change the value, ARM is going to pop up a message that says this field has been recommended as locked. Are you certain you want to change it? So that way somebody can't accidentally make a change, but if they absolutely have to, then there is that capability. So I think for the locking of the values, giving that slight flexibility might not be a bad idea. So that way people won't have to come back. If you can dream up of any possible scenario where they might need to change the value, it might be safer to use the recommended rule instead. Really only though, I think for locking, because the other type of information or the other type of rule that I want to show quickly here is the hiding information. So one example would be if I have like some confidential information, we recommend putting that maybe in like the description column, for example. So maybe I have kind of dummy treatment names and then my experimental names that just our company should know, you could put here in like the description column. And then I can right click and hide. Oh, that's a hidden field, sorry. I can hide this field and choose that anybody who opens this study that's not in my company will not be allowed to see that information. And so then here, looking at the study rules, again, that will show up as now a hidden field. And so that column of information will be hidden from anybody that opens the study that's not in my company. That one, there really isn't a required or recommended, it's visible or not, essentially. So that's why it has kind of its own rule ID. That's the other tool you could use if there's something that your company, of course, wants to keep track of, but maybe is still confidential and you wouldn't want the contractor or somebody else that has the file to know about it. Then that column will be hidden if you open it with a different license that's in a different company. All right, well, we've kind of hit the top of the hour here, so I want to definitely respect everyone's time. But as I mentioned, I do like the questions. It was great kind of as we went through the session for the questions, so I can hold on the line here for a couple more minutes. If anyone does have questions, feel free to send those through. But for those of you that might have another appointment, kind of get the show on the road here. So. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and maybe we'll see you soon at a future webinar. And if you have any other questions and you have to get going, you can always send us an email and we can try to help too. So thanks everybody.